¿Qué pasa, raza? How you guys doing today? They always remind me of how much time I have because I'm really bad at time. Now, as a motivational speaker, the first thing they tell you to do is not to put the audience to sleep. But I always like to defy the odds, so I'm going to ask you all to indulge me a little bit. I'm going to ask everybody to just close your eyes for a few moments. Today you've heard the importance of knowing your story. And for the next couple of moments, I'm going to ask you to have a conversation with your heart. I want you to think about why you love who you are. And oftentimes when we think about why we love ourselves, we oftentimes have to explore the obstacles that we've had to overcome in our lives. Because it's oftentimes in those times that we find our resiliency. We find our power. We find our ability to overcome all odds. We're able to lift ourselves up from that adversity. I want you to think about the word leadership. And I want you to think about who those people in your lives have been who have made sacrifices for you to be who you are today. Some of those people may be your parents or your abuelitos. Like you heard in my story, my grandfather brought his 14 kids to the United States when my dad was only 13 years old. He didn't come here with a job, but he came here with the belief that life would be better. In Mexico, my abuelito used to make candles, and that was before his town had electricity. And when I think about my abuelito, who I never had the chance to meet, I think about his legacy of giving life to people in the community in which he lived. Still today, our family gives life to the communities in which we live. I want you to think about where you come from, where your community is, what your roots are, where your story begins. They say we must know history. If we don't know history, we'll repeat history. I say we need to know history so we can change history, so we can make history. I want you to think about possibilities and what it means to dream. And I want you to dream without limits, without fear, without any negativity. But like those dreams that we have when we're kids, full of possibilities and optimism. I want you to think about what your dream is for yourself, for your family, for your communities. I want you to think about the word social change. And what is that issue that you see plaguing your community that you wished you had the power and the abilities to help solve and change? We know that still in this country, as Latinos, we are falling behind in education. Some of our young men have just the amount of opportunities to end up in college as they do in prison. We got to break those things. I want you to listen to your heart for the next couple of seconds. Listen to your stories. Think of those people who you thought of, who you saw, who you're like, that was my person, that's my community, that was my obstacle. Those are the issues that I want to help solve and change in my community. I want you to listen to this poem that was written in 1969 by Lalo Delgado. And the poem is called Stupid America. Stupid America, see that Chicano with the big knife in his steady hand? He doesn't want to knife you. He wants to sit on a bench and carve Christ figures, but you won't let him. Stupid America, hear that Chicano shouting curses in the street? He is a poet without paper and pencil, and since he cannot write, his mind will explode. Stupid America, remember that Chicanito flunking math and English? He is the Picasso of your western states, and he will die with 1,000 masterpieces hanging only from his mind. Stupid America. You may open your eyes. See, that poem was written in 1969, 50 years ago. Although I wasn't alive there, at that time. Although there was a kid at West High School who was a freshman, and I did their orientation the other day, and I told them I was going to take them back to my first day of high school, and I said, how old do you guys think I am? This little cholo-looking kid raised his hand, he said, and I was all excited because he's sitting in the front row, or young men usually don't do that in school, and he was sitting right there in the front row. I said, how old do you think, bro? He said, 54. I said, we're going to do some work with you. But that poem tells a story of a community right here in Denver that during that time was under attack. Our people were under attack. Our people didn't have opportunities to learn about their culture and their history in schools, very much like today. And although that poem was written 50 years ago, you can easily take out the word Chicano, you can put Latino, you can put undocumented, you can put whatever it is that you want to put in there, and that poem is just as relevant today as it was then. I ask you guys to think about your stories and have that conversation with your heart. I have a couple of questions for you guys now. How many of you guys sitting in this audience today, and if you agree, raise your hand. How many of you guys would see yourselves as being community activists? Raise your hand. Very impressive, right? It kind of tells us where we're at today. See, oftentimes in schools when I ask students, how many of you guys see yourselves as leaders? I get the kind of like the semi-hand going up, and oftentimes, more than not, you look around the room, and there aren't very many hands that are raised. My next question to you all, how many of you guys are parents or have younger brothers and sisters or nieces and nephews that you care about and you love? Raise your hand. You see, even in the space, not everybody raised their hand to the last question, but that question, everybody raised their hands. And this is the truth. Whether you believe or see yourselves as a leader or an activist, if you raised your hands to that second question, you best believe you are a leader. You are an activist. If you care about your health care, your education, if you care about what's going on in your community, you are an activist. And activism begins with us having the ability and the power to share our stories. Oftentimes, when we see pictures with words by them, like leaders and dreams and possibilities and education, oftentimes it's easy for us to think that isn't us. But it is us. That's what a lot of those poems taught us. That is us. And every single person in this room today has an obligation and a responsibility to tell our stories. Oftentimes, our students tell us, they tell me, Mr. I don't have a story. And I walk them through that same exercise that I asked you guys to do today. And they start to see the power of our story. See, the story is our power. Our voice is our story. They are interchangeable. And once we take ownership of those stories, everything and anything is possible for us in our communities. They say our youth are our future. I say our youth are our present, and that's why I've dedicated my life to making sure that our young people stand up and fight for their dreams. I have a couple of these students with me here today. I want Angel Plata to stand up for a second. This young man, lost his sister in a very tragic way. He could have easily said, I'm going to go down that same path that she did. But instead, Angel said, I'm going to fulfill her dreams. I'm going to live out her dreams for her. And last year, he started a scholarship for an inspired student to go to college. I want Diego Diaz to stand up for a second. Diego is one of those students where I say, bro, I'm not betting on the short term, I'm betting on the long term, right? As an undocumented student, it was only a week ago that he lost his grandmother. And he called me to tell me that he had lost his grandmother, and I talked to his mom, and it's one of those stories of where they couldn't even go back to see his grandmother and her mother as she took her final breaths. And as I talked to Diego on the phone, he said, Jess, this is the inspiration that I need to continue to fight and chase my dreams. I told him, that's not the inspiration, and I don't know what else to tell you, bro, because I'm at a loss of what to inspire you. That has to be your inspiration. Thank you, Diego. I'm going to get into work up time, but I want my Adam City students to stand up. Aspen, you can stand up too. These students have been told for years that they go to a school that doesn't matter, that they come from a community that doesn't matter, that they come from the worst high school in the state of Colorado, yet each and every single one of them continues to stand up and fight for their education, for their right to exist, for their dreams to go on, for their abilities to persist in life, to bring hope back to their communities. And for them, I always say, no matter where I'm at, no matter whether the school district lets me work there or not, I will continue to support them, to love them, to embrace them, to show them that it doesn't matter where you come from to determine where you go in life. Thank you guys. I always tell our students, you have all the answers right here in the palm of your hands. The image that they showed for Carlos up here on the screen was the fist. It's the same image that we use at Inspire. And I always tell the kids, as long as you learn why you love yourself, who the people are, what made sacrifices for you, where your community is, what your dreams are, the issues that you want to help solve in your community, they become a fist. They say our fist is the same size as our hearts. Today, as you guys go back to your schools, your families, your communities, we ask you all to raise your fist, to raise your hearts, and share the love that you have inside of your stories with other people, because stories are all we have in this life. They are all we take with us in the next life. They are all that we leave behind. They become our legacies. And every single person in this room has a legacy that is worth remembering. Lastly, if you ever see a person take their last breaths, oftentimes it is their hearts that is the last thing to go. Because that is how resilient, that is how powerful, that is how strong our hearts are. Let's take care of our hearts, let's share our hearts, and let's make sure that we're working together in 2020 to bring change to our communities, for each other, for our raza, for our people, and for the descendants who are going to come after us. Thank you guys very much.